All right, hello, welcome to Digital Marketing Masterclass. Today we have another very special episode. We have Brian McIntire. He's one of the co-founders of the Think Company out of Conshohocken, PA, which is actually the same town that we're located in. I've known Brian for years, and even early, what I would call, not early internet, wasn't like the first internet where, it was made by the military, but very early internet. Brian and I were always connecting. And Brian could design, he could basically kind of see the full landscape of marketing and how it was going to engage people. And I always remember that I was like, wow, this guy's really, really good. And then years later, we connected again, and now we talk quite a bit. And just a huge fan of Think Company. So Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. It's very nice of you to say those things. It's good to see you.
Tell us a little bit about Think Company real quick, and then we'll dive into some topics.
Okay, sure. Well, we were founded in 2007. Me and my business partner, Carl White, started it way back then. That was before UX, or user experience design, was really even a thing. But we had gotten frustrated about being like the design team at the end of a process of software development. So we would often be asked to make it look pretty or to apply the corporate colors or whatever. And that just seemed like that wasn't the right way to do things. So we tried very hard to change that inside the companies that he and I were working with or for, but eventually decided we'd break out on our own and start a company that focuses on doing design research upfront, creating a design spec that a team could build software from, and in that way it's more user-friendly and well designed, and it gets the jobs done that it's trying to get done. So that was back in 2007 we started, and it's been just slow, steady growth since then. At first it was Carl and me and a couple of friends in a storage closet at one of our clients' office buildings, and today,
wow,
we're about 150 people distributed all around the country. Post-COVID, we turned into an all virtual company. We still have two offices, like you said, one in Conshohocken, one down in Center City, Philadelphia, but not too many people hanging out there these days. Everybody's working from home and kind of liking that new way of working.
Gotcha. I was, I was aware of your office in Philly, and I didn't even think to ask.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And so when you would come into the office, you were mostly out of Conshohocken.
Yes. Although, well, right. Yeah. Right before COVID, I had a few weekly meetings, often traveling into Philly for those, just because that was sort of now the epicenter of the company. But nowadays, almost all the meetings are virtual.
It's funny because we've got our office. We got it specifically right near the train station, so we could get Philadelphia talent. We only have one of our employees from Philadelphia, and she used to drive in. So.
Oh, that's funny.
Like the proximity of the train station.
Yeah.
Still hasn't paid off, but I'm sure it will.
Yeah. Well, we learned that folks didn't want to do the reverse commute so much, so that's why we punched into the city in 2014, and we haven't regretted that. Although, of course, things are different today. We have 30 or 35 of us are in various cities all over the country. So yeah. That's great.
Now, give me a day in the life of what you do, and then kind of what your company does. I mean, obviously, in your intro, you were talking about usability and things like that. But what does it look like? What are some of your clients that you have, and then walk me through like some of the processes that you do.
Okay. I would say there's there's a few things that we do typically. We work with companies that often have proprietary software that they have built themselves, and then their customers use that software to get certain jobs done. And a lot of times people come to us because that software was built 10 or 15 years ago, and it's very outdated. It doesn't work so well. But there's a challenge because they have, 1 million customers working on this software every day and their own internal teams. So they need a redesign, but they need it to be done in a sensitive way so as to allow their users to understand how to use the application as it's changing. So that's a pretty common scenario for us. We're talking about companies like Comcast, Merck, Johnson & Johnson. A lot of these systems are internal systems, not even client-facing or even customer-facing. A lot of them are employee-facing systems. that are very complicated in terms of workflows. They're logging into a system, they're working through different tasks, multiple screens, lots of forms, buttons, but they have jobs to get done along the way, and our job is to come in, interview the people who use the application, find out how they use it, find out what they love about the way it works currently, what they hate about it, what the most common tasks they do to accomplish certain things within the app, and then we go through a process of redesigning it, iterating it, going back to them with design ideas, prototypes, and eventually sometimes we build it ourselves. Sometimes, depending on the client's needs, we'll deliver a design spec that their internal delivery team or development team would then build it. Other times, people don't have an existing application. Companies have a desire to build an application from scratch. So we'll do a very similar process, although we'll be talking with potential customers in that case. We're doing a lot of market research to see what else is out there, trying not to reinvent the wheel, but being careful not to steal ideas by mistake. So that competitive analysis is super important in those scenarios. And then, it's similar. We prototype it, we go to potential users, stakeholders, test it over and over again, and eventually build the thing. Often we would build the thing for folks nowadays.
Yeah. And so
Hopefully
yeah.
Yeah.
So do you guys have like an agreed upon goal as far as maybe it's efficiency, maybe it's engagement, things like that? How do you do the initial spec of like saying, hey, look, this is where you are, this is where you could be, and we're going to measure until we get there? What's that process like?
That's a good question. Sometimes that can be tricky. It's hard to measure sort of the ROI of UX sometimes. People kind of get that today more than they used to. We used to be selling the need for UX or for good UX. Nowadays, people get it. They're like, yeah, the interface has to be intuitive. It has to be beautiful. It has to be easy to use. So that's why they come to us in the first place. And these days, we're selling why work with Think Company on this versus some other company. They know they need these services. But that being said, yeah, everybody's looking for metrics to say, how do we succeed? And as a company, we always try to do that with our customers too. So what does success look like? And I would say it varies for each client. Clients come to us with different goals. Sometimes it's straightforward when you look at data. Maybe it's time on certain screens. Maybe it's time to complete tasks. Those are things that sometimes our clients bring us data that they have from previous app. Sometimes they don't. They just don't have it. So sometimes that's in the research process where we'll ask people what they like about it, what they don't like about it, what they wish would change. And then we'll go back and re-ask after we've got a prototype, does this meet your needs? So sometimes it's as simple as, how did the research results look from, baseline researching on the current application to a new design. Ideally, though, it is looking at some hard data that comes out of the application's usage. But at the end of the day, I think, luckily, the industry has evolved to the point where people get the fact that they can look at their app, they can see that it's not intuitive at all. They've gotten feedback from their customers that it's not intuitive, it's hard to use. And then they've gotten people leaving, their application for a younger, less robust, but way more beautiful or way more easy to use application. It's the new kid on the block. And they want to avoid their customers leaving their application to go to a competitor. So those are some metrics we can look at. It takes a while to get that data, but if they have people leaving the application or, essentially leaving the company as a customer for a competitor, we can look, a couple of years down the road, has that slowed down? And we can then make some assumptions. Usually it has to be some assumptions because it's not always just UX changes that cause, better conversions or better retention, customer retention. But people get that stuff is sort of table stakes nowadays. 15 years ago, absolutely was not. But now we all have these magic computers in our hands.
I know.
And the apps that we use every day are really sexy. They are really easy to use. And so people expect their business apps to be the same way.
Yeah, yeah. And do you connect usability also with, we call it content, obviously we as a content marketing company, we have something, it's a term that I believe HubSpot made, but it was called user-based triggers. Now, do any of your platforms connect to content engines or anything like that?
Oh, sure.
I'm trying to use big words here, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, we'll work with certain clients and we'll try to develop user-based triggers. So they'll have, let's say it's a portal or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And with heat mapping or whatever that is, we'll say, hey, you know what? The way your clients are engaging, if they're neglecting a certain portion, we're going to double down on making sure that we over communicate the value of that portion.
Okay.
Or if they're, or if we can really feel like, I'm just oversimplifying it here, but they've done action 2 and 3, but not 4, we can start to drip market to them about the parts that they're missing. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
that's one of those things. Is that something that you guys see a lot? Are you starting to see that more and more, that usability actually informs content development?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, we do a lot of content development, content strategy. We have a content strategy department now. We used to.
Nice.
It used to be. I was a practitioner as a UXer. I used to be a content strategist as well. Our current content strategists would kind of laugh if they heard me say that, because of course I wasn't a content strategist.
Yeah. I was a graphic designer too, so I get that.
But to be a designer, you have to be, right? If you're going to be a good designer, then you're thinking about content. The phrase content first. You're not going to design something based solely on Greek text. That's going to be an unsuccessful outcome almost every time. So, yeah, I think for us, content is always a big piece of the puzzle, and if not the biggest, certainly early on in a project. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to answer your question quite the way you asked it, but for us, talking about content governance, how content gets created, where content comes from, how it stays fresh, is that even important? What the content is, there's so many questions about content, and I'm just scratching the surface with that. But yeah, I mean, that's absolutely key to having a robust application. Most of the work we do is not, a marketing website or a website that helps someone simply talk about their services. Like I mentioned, it's usually very transactional, very workflow heavy applications. Still incredibly important that we address the content in the right ways. In fact, potentially more important that we do a good job with content strategy. But certainly when it comes to jobs to be done, which is simply, you come into an app to accomplish a certain task. You want to be able to get to that task quickly and accomplish it smoothly. How many apps do you and I use, business apps mostly, where it's like, oh my gosh, really? I've got to click on that and then that and then that just to get this job done the main thing I want to do in this thing every day. So we do a lot of work to make sure that we uncover those workflows that are most common and make sure the content structure enables people to get that job done really fast. So yeah, a lot of times we'll look at an existing app and we'll do the research, and these 5 things that people want to do with the app every day are, the entry point for those tasks is not obvious at all. And they've learned these workarounds because they've had to use this thing for 10 years. But no, we can do a much better job. The client can do a much better job exposing that content in the right places quickly so that people can get the job done and get out real fast. So yeah, I think there's definitely some correlation there between what you were mentioning and sort of the UX world.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that, obviously we still do a lot of web development and stuff like that. And it's so shocking to me how the everyday users of the website or the platform that we're building, they know the answers to their problem. It's just they were never there in the initial discussion. So they use it every single day, and like, this is the workarounds I have to do, and this is what I have to do. I wish if this button was here, it would be a whole lot different than me having to know that answer 2 screens ago. And all that stuff like that. You just multiply every click over, let's say 1,000 times a month, you're like, that stuff adds up. You know what I mean? It's,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to get the customer or the client or, whoever,
Yep.
whatever they refer to it, is involved in the process.
Mhm.
It's unbelievable to me that some firms or even internal teams would try to redesign without talking to the actual users. And that
Yeah.
I think it happens less and less nowadays because people get it. They get that you got to talk to your users. But yeah, it's a super, super important part of the process for sure because they're the ones that know. They're the ones that know
Yeah.
the answer. As designers, we do work in so many different industries, and we have expertise in many. So, we're not starting from scratch, but we always say, no, you, client, and your customers, you're the experts. We need to hear from
Mhm.
you. How do you want to use this thing? What do you think this thing should do? How do you think this thing should look? We'll execute on those ideas, and we'll bring some ideas to the table from previous experience, no doubt about it. But talking to the people who actually use the app is absolutely paramount.
But it's very funny though, because I don't, this is, in real life, right? So,
Yeah,
I have, my, most of my meetings are with my two business partners,
yeah.
and my business partner, we both use Apple computers, right? And I know it
Hmm.
sounds so weird, but like it drives me nuts to sit next to him because he doesn't do the same things in the same order that I think are so like obvious and available, right? So
Mm.
for example, like this is dumb, but I'm trying to get to a point. Is
Yeah,
like when he goes and he tries to send an attachment, I open up Finder and I drag the attachment onto the email and then I press send. He'll like press the attachment button, go up and search. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like find the attachment and do it like that. Now I know that
Right.
sounds really dumb, right? But like the hardest part, I guess, in your job is like saying, look, we know the most efficient way, but people have been doing this for 10 years. And so I also have to be in a spot where, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it can't just be what you do. It's funny because now I'm going into my second
Hmm.
story is like when I go and I sell marketing and stuff like that, like for example, like ebooks, white papers, or et cetera, like that. I might be selling someone that, hey, we're going to try to use automation. So we're going to need to collect people's information. We'll use an ebook or a white paper. And they'll be like, well, I never download those. And I was like,
Hmm.
but guess what? You're not the rest of the world. You know what I
Totally.
mean? And
Totally.
so like you're playing this game. I'm like, I have to go and do all of this extra
Yeah.
usability for you, but I can give you tons of data that says you're the outlier, but you're the guy who signs the check. So,
No, that's
you know what I mean?
interesting. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Totally. We do a lot of
Yeah.
education up front on our projects about some of this type of thing because, yes, often there's a stakeholder that has a lot of opinions, and those opinions are
Yep.
important, and we hear them
Sure.
and we record them, and they're part of our
Yep.
research, no doubt about it. But the cliche phrase, "There's no I in design," which of course there is an I in word design, but the point is that if you find yourself as a project team member, a researcher, a designer, talking about this thing and using the word I all the time, I think
Yep.
when I do you're
Yeah.
missing the point. So yeah, it's sometimes hard to get that through the heads of certain stakeholders that, the whole reason they're doing this project is because these four things annoy them.
Mhm.
So they want those things fixed. And that's fine. We can probably get to those. But we need to validate some of those assumptions with some
Mhm.
research to make sure that those things are actually true for a majority of users. But yeah, that's a
Yeah.
fun challenge.
It is. It's hard. I mean, so you're trying to make data-driven decisions. You make this really big conclusion. You back it up with data, and sometimes you
Hmm.
just get hit by the guy who's like, "My company, my rules." You know what I mean? And I'm like, "Oh my gosh," you know what I mean? But you just
Right.
run into those situations where I'm like, "I promise you, you don't know it, but you're probably getting in your own way." But
Yeah. Well, again, I think
ultimately,
it's all
you
about
tend to retreat. Yeah.
it's all about education up front. Setting
Yeah.
ground rules for the project.
Yep.
Hey, you're an expert in your domain, but we're an expert in UX and UI design and dev. So let us do our job, and we're going to need you to do your job so we can do our job well. And you kind of set those roles and responsibilities up front.
Yep.
Sometimes it doesn't matter. They still
Yeah.
want it
Yeah.
to be purple, and at the end of the day, it's going to have to be
Yeah.
purple. And it
Yep.
is just what it is. Even though 90% of your users said they would prefer blue. So yeah,
Yep.
you pick your battles.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, tell me something. Has AI impacted your industry at all?
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
how's
sure.
it impacted?
A lot of the apps that we work on certainly have some AI components to, how
Mm.
the data gets generated, even how some of the screen, segments need to be generated. Um,
Yeah.
and just the type of content, where it comes from, how it needs to be displayed. It's sometimes, because if it involves AI, it's maybe a little bit less predictable. So maybe it needs
Mhm.
to be a little bit, um, more flexible in terms of how the UI gets designed and built. But that's something that all of us in hopefully, in the software space are trying to get our arms around and tackle these days. But again, like all the apps we use every day, whether it's Instagram or
Yep.
TikTok or Be Real or whatever the newest thing is, you know, there's AI. So we have to realize that if we're going to be doing UI design, we've got to understand what that is, and we've got to understand how it impacts
Yeah.
how we design interfaces.
Yeah. And are you running into any GPT-3 type stuff?
I don't know if I know
So
what you're referring to.
I'm sorry. So
It's okay.
GPT-3 it's an AI, it's an open source API, but it's a platform that basically writes content. And what it'll do is it'll look at the top 10 search results, and it literally writes content. And while it's
Interesting.
not there yet, I promise you, I'll send you some things. It'll totally freak you out about,
Huh.
while it's not perfect, how good it is, and it's only 2022.
That's
It's a
interesting.
very, it's super freaky, bro. But like,
I'll bet some of my
we're,
team members know
yeah,
exactly what you're talking about.
our angle with AI is that if we don't get ahead of it,
Mm-hmm.
we'll get run over by it. And
Mm.
so what I don't want to do is, if it was up to me, it would never exist at all. All right, like I guess I would rather just be like,
Right.
did you ever see The Village where they just like choose to live in like the 80s or whatever? They choose to live in the colonial times.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, sure.
I
Absolutely.
don't exactly want to not have running water, but I would like to cut off the technology curve at the waist and just say, look, we're you know what I mean, we're at the last stages of normal. It's going to get
Sure.
very weird for my kids. You know what I mean? It's just gonna, the speed has made me a dinosaur way earlier than I thought I'd be a dinosaur for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't think about AI a ton. Certainly, I'm using it every day. So I get how scary maybe it could be. But from a business standpoint, it's interesting. Certainly, I think we need to embrace it, know all about it, make sure we're playing in that space, or we probably will be left behind. But at the same time, I think it's kind of like a lot of other things that have come down the road through the years, where if it's an automation of content, the thing you're referring to, it definitely puts your business at risk, because you all are content creators. So
Mm-hmm.
if there's something that's going to create content automatically, then
Yep.
could that jeopardize your business? Yes, it could. But what I think it does is it forces you and us or whoever to think, okay, so if technology is going to take that away from me, potentially, then what can we do that technology can't do? What kind of custom thought work can we do that no technology is really ever going to be able to come in and
Mm-hmm.
do? I know that for us, earlier on in the history of our company, we did do some websites and things that,
Mm-hmm.
were marketing websites. And now people can buy a Squarespace template and
It's
have
crazy,
a
right?
really, really beautiful site. And, what are they paying for that? $50 a month?
Mm-hmm.
So why would we try to compete in that space? And we just
Yep.
decided that early on, like, we'll embrace this. If there's clients that come to us and they're small, maybe they need a really nice looking website, it's not too complicated. Hey, well, have you considered a Squarespace site? And maybe we know a small graphic design firm
Yep.
that can help them stand it up, whatever. But what we have decided, or what we learned through that technology coming in and taking over that space, was that we had to look at what services we could provide that technology really can't come in and
Yep.
provide. And it's about, process. It's about involving humans in thinking things through. Um, the collaboration that occurs during the research, just involving people in the process. There's technology that helps us with all of those things. But at the end of the day, there's no templated application for a lot of the things that our customers want to do.
Sure.
And we're talking about, we're living in a world where there's Squarespace. I'm sorry, I said Squarespace. What I meant is Salesforce. A lot of times what we're competing with is Salesforce, because Salesforce, agents or salespeople will come in and tell a company, oh, we can build that on our platform. And yes, maybe they can, but the platform certainly isn't intended for that. It's not going to be very intuitive. So a lot of times we'll plug into Salesforce in the right ways, but there is still value, at least in our industry, for truly custom software. So I think AI is another example potentially of, it's something that's not going to go away. We have to be able to know how it works and incorporate it into our projects in the right ways. But I think you should be able to say to your customers, there's this custom content generator, and it is powerful, and we will use it where it makes sense. But that can't really replace the brains that we have available to you to really create some strategic content for you. So it forces you to refine your business, which is probably in the end a good thing.
Yeah, you know what? And so the analogy that I use, right, is that for generations, like accountants were using something the equivalent of an abacus.
Mm-hmm.
Calculator came out, and it was not like, oh my gosh, there'll be no more accountants anymore, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they just used a better tool. There's, on the average client that we have, budget dependent, they're only scratching the surface of what's possible with us. Okay? And so what the tool does is it saves us time. We might be able to get actually more done and get to the things that we never really could get to because of scale, because of budget and things like that. So it's not like, oh my gosh, we're going to be out of a job. It changes our sales narrative of saying, look, this is what's possible. This is how we can use the tool. It might save us 1 hour out of 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what we're able to do now, because we're using new technology, is get to things that you would have never gotten to, know? And it happens all the time. Like using automation to automation workflows and all that stuff like that, to do that at scale, multiply by different products, by different buyer personas and things like that, it costs a fortune. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? Like we have the data, we can make an argument, but then when we make the argument, it's connected to 5 other arguments, and they pick the lowest priority arguments, and then the other 3 just are like, they go on the someday pile.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm sure it's probably in your space as well. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now it allows us to maybe not get done all 5, but at least as opposed to 2, it might help me get to 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that it's just very interesting. But one of the things that I was noticing just with AI is, and this is kind of like what I was trying to talk to, I just talk to my friends about AI all the time. And we were talking about how I drive a car and I was spending $140 a week in gas.
Okay.
Literally terrible, right?
Yeah.
So I got an electric car.
Okay.
Right. And, I've obviously saved a bunch of money and stuff like that. But how intuitive my car is that it knows that my cell phone is nearby and it opens the doors as I'm walking to it. Right. Just a couple seconds. Right. When I drive my wife's car, it doesn't. And I know that sounds really dumb, but
why didn't you get her the nice car and you get to drive the old one?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. I'm going to try to keep this recording away from her. Actually.
Come on, Chris.
Yeah. Right. But it's amazing how a couple seconds is this driving factor where people will spend a whole lot more money for just 5% or 10% more convenience. And so we are always talking about what is that critical moment where your device gets implanted in your skin or in your body, right?
Oh boy.
And I know it's crazy, right? But everyone thinks it's going to be this huge monumental thing, like I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's going to control my blood pressure. It's going to make me thinner. I'm like, wait till you stand next to me and Brian has that chip, and he's just 2 seconds faster on every answer, or 2 seconds faster on this and on that, right? We're not going to sell ourselves downriver for something monumental. I promise you, it'll be seconds. It's like, it's like,
Interesting.
Sounds
like Black Mirror.
Yeah, seriously. But it's like this Adam and Eve story, like about like, you try to think of like, well, why an apple? It was like, because apples have been cheap since man has been created. So like, essentially, you're going to sell out God for something as small as an apple. We will sell out our own humanity for seconds. And in a very weird way, with what you guys do, right? It's like companies are going to spend this type of money for efficiency, and the efficiency is just seconds that compound. Do you know what I mean? It's just a very weird way of looking at things. You know what I mean? But the difference between a very intuitive app might be 1 or 2 clicks, or just 1 or 2 scrolls, or whatever that is. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't know if you ever knew this or not, but YouTube is so painfully scared of TikTok, right? So if you're in YouTube and you're in stories and you're in the scroll mode, which basically makes the interface almost identical to TikTok. If I shut down YouTube and then I open up YouTube again, I open up back in stories, not at the YouTube homepage anymore.
Okay.
My point is they know that the death scroll, the doom scroll, is so powerful that when you leave, they put you right back in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting.
As opposed to opening up YouTube, and it's like, what's your query? What are you looking for? It's like, no, we want time on site and all stuff like that, right? And so it's just like these little things that we just that we pick up on all the time, like as designers and as marketers and stuff like that, that the difference between good to great sometimes is a couple seconds. It's bizarre.
Totally. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's true of a lot of our clients, and you kind of said it, but let's say we're working on an app for a Comcast technician who's out, doing house calls all day long, and every time he gets back to his truck, he or she has to enter data from the visit, and she could sit in that truck for 30 minutes and struggle her way through a really hard to use interface, or she could do 5 clicks, have all the right questions presented to her in the right order, boom, 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 done, start the vehicle onto the next job. And so, a client like Comcast is looking at saving so much money by making those interactions so much more intuitive. And for her, it might be the difference of 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but you multiply that times 10 house calls per day times 1,000, in the Philadelphia area, trucks. It's huge. The savings are huge. So that gets to the ROI of UI for sure. And I agree with you. Yeah, sometimes it is those a few seconds of saved time that, for us, it's like if we can help people be less frustrated at work during the day, that's a win. That's part of the reason why we exist, is to help that technician not be dropping F-bombs in her truck 10 times a day because she's so frustrated with the stupid app that her employer gave her doesn't work well. So we'll relieve that stress. We'll be happy to do that for folks.
Yeah. So we use an argument here. We say people buy, and I would say that you retain the client that they know, like, and trust. And I think that a lot of people, I know it sounds weird, but I think a lot of people say, okay, we're going to double down on the no, and we're going to, even from a content standpoint, we're going to double down on some trust. But do they actually like you? And the like is the investment in, are they easy to work with? Every time I open up the app, am I frustrated? Does it feel like I did 10 clicks when 3 would do? And all that stuff like that. You know what I mean? And there's a value in like that is, it's actually almost feels like a lagging indicator. Do you know what I mean by that? Like, in other words, you don't find in real time sometimes if they like you. You find if they don't like you when they leave, or when they go somewhere else, or you open up a competitor's and you're like, ooh, I like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Yeah, sure.
it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, good software development design involves an ongoing, always improving process. So,
Yep.
you know, we rarely come into a project where it's a finite project length,
Mhm.
and we're just done. We're kind of never
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
At least our customers are certainly never done. Whether they want to continue and engage with us is up to them, of
Yeah.
course. But you know, the days of every 3 years you're going to redesign your app, those have to be over. It's continuous,
Mhm.
like a program, you know, of
Yep.
continuous checking in with customers, looking for those leading indicators instead of the lagging ones, and proactively finding out, you know, how are we doing with this? What do people wish was different? And then iterating in small steps every so often. And we learn this from our phones. Again, a lot of this is being done by the big software companies that are putting apps in our phones. How many times do you reload whatever the app is that you're using? It might be a native app, it might be Instagram, whatever it is. And some couple of things are just a little bit different. It happens weekly almost.
Yeah.
But that's because these people know, hey, we're not going to just wait for 3 years and then completely redesign Instagram. No, they're going to slowly morph it over time, hopefully, and it is certainly based on usage data, user
Yep.
feedback, whatever else is going on in the industry, competitive analysis. I mean, YouTube's doing a ton of competitive analysis, obviously, as
Yeah.
they change to be more like the most popular apps of the day. So
Yep.
yeah, that kind of program management is extremely important in the work we
Mhm.
do to make sure that people don't just set it and forget it. You can't do that
Yeah.
anymore. It needs to be a constant evolution.
Yeah. And so where we go, my company does, and maybe yours does too. But one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to slowly collect as much information as possible about our
Mm.
potential clients and clients. What we
Mm-hmm.
don't do is we don't ask them to fill out a ton of information. We find triggers throughout the process to collect just another morsel and another morsel and another morsel.
Mm.
And then we start to collect these stories over time. And then what we do is we compare the most ideal sales opportunity. In other words, I'm just using this is simplified, but let's say it takes 7 touches. You got to come to my website, you got to watch a video, you got to engage my social media, da 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 da, and that's 7. And I
Mm-hmm.
say these are my top 20 ideal clients. How do we make sure that the other potential clients are going to get through those 7 critical touches? And if there are
Mm.
more than 7, what are they seeing? What are they looking for that they didn't get with the 7 critical touches? But what we're doing is we're gathering more and more information over time. But what we're starting to find out with a lot of our clients, specifically SaaS-based clients, is that in their mind, what they would love to do is give their technology away for free
Mm.
because they're collecting so much data that can actually be usable in this whole
Mm.
like big data environment.
Yeah.
So I had a
Yeah.
guy on my
Sure.
podcast last week, and he does what's called uh, lit video books. And lit video books is a brand new category. Have you seen these yet?
Nope.
Basically, what they do is they take best-selling non-fictional books and they
Mm.
turn them into one-hour documentaries.
Wow.
Super
Cool.
interactive, amazing graphics, interviews from the speaker themselves. They're amazing, and the types of learners it's just amazing. Like I'm the guy who can watch a movie and like quote a funny line from the movie after watching it once.
Okay.
But then I can also open up a book and read the same page 5 times. Do you know what
Okay.
I mean?
Right.
So like
Right.
it's just how you learn, right?
Sure.
But one of the things he was talking about is he's like these best-selling authors, their medium is a book, and
Mm-hmm.
they get no information of who the buyer personas are that bought it. Did they read the entire book? Any of that stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
But in this new medium, authors are getting tons and tons of information of who their ideal audience is. It's
Yeah.
all
Huh.
trackable. And so eventually what happens is while they love to sell these lit video books, what they'd also love to be able to do is give feedback to authors about, hey, when you write your next book, you didn't know it, but you know what? You're actually more effective with baby boomers. They're the ones that complete the book. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Also, people aren't holding tight for your main conclusion of how to solve the problem. So you got to get there quicker or you're going to have people drop off. You know what I mean? It's very
Cool.
interesting how how even the smallest of companies, they're not that small, but even the smallest of companies are starting to learn that same thing from the social dilemma. Like, you know what? Like eventually you are the product, meaning the data, how you engage eventually becomes the product.
Yeah.
And the medium that gets you there is just a way for us to collect data, because if data is more expensive than oil, like let's build a mousetrap, see how they engage, and then sell that data. They take your name off, obviously, you know what I mean? But they sell that data to people that can use it more effectively or differently or whatever.
Sure.
It's a very weird connected world that we sort of live in. You know what I mean? But
yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to look those up.
yeah.
Sounds
They're awesome.
Cool.
It's cheap too. It's like Netflix. It's $9 a month.
Wow.
You know what I mean? But
yeah.
Really great, like really great books too.
Yeah.
They have licenses for 150 new authors, and they're crushing it.
Huh.
Yeah. The other thing that's cool is the lawyers haven't gotten there yet, and so imagine every other medium is all lawyered up. Well, because this is a new category, they can sell it internationally. They can do all these things like very effectively. The cost of a reprint in Portuguese is probably a fortune for a book, but they can just dub it or re-record in Portuguese like that. They're onto something really, really cool. But the product is amazing too. So it helps that the product's amazing. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
But the story behind it is still the same. It's like the data behind the engagement eventually becomes more important than the product itself.
Yeah.
If you have a buyer of that data.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's cool. Well, look, we're getting to about our time. I really appreciate you jumping on, man. You're
of course
probably one of the easiest people to talk to on the planet. So.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
That's nice of you to say.
That's great. So if our users wanted to, our listeners wanted to reach out to you or Think Company, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, they could email me at brian@thinkcompany.com. Always, of course, go to thinkcompany.com and learn all about what we're about. We're on all the socials as well, of course. But yeah, that's probably the easiest way to do it.
So how many Brians do you have in your company that they had to add an initial to their last name?
We've had a few through the years.
I am the Brian.
Currently. I met him at our most recent quarterly meeting. He's a good dude, but I told him, now there's two of us, so that's going to be a little confusing.
He didn't have a Y, did he? Because that's even worse.
Yeah,
it's even worse. It's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I was. Let's just say I was in the company early enough to get one of the first name only emails, but we don't do that anymore. Yeah, we've got first name dot last name. That's the template, of course.
That's funny. Yeah, I still get all the time, like, I'll say my name and they'll be like, "Is that with a K?" I was like, "How German do you think I am?" Like. Christmas, Christian, funny. Also like that. Like 99% of the time it's going to be CH, but everyone like verbatim, like every single time it's always a K. You know what I mean? I'm just like, it happens more than you would ever imagine, Brian.
Yeah, I hear you because I get a lot of Y. Is it a Y? I get
a lot of the Y.
They don't hear my B all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Ryan. Like I'll just roll it. That's fine. It can be.
Nice. Awesome. Well, again, thank you for joining us. To our listeners, this is Digital Marketing Masterclass. My goal is to get some of the best thought leaders in marketing and in design and usability, all to join the show, kind of share the tips, the tricks, and the things that just kind of made their companies into who they are. And Brian, you're absolutely one of them. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Chris.
Listeners, please subscribe, like, do all that stuff, and we will see you next time. Thank you for watching this video. What I wanted to do now is share something with you that we believe is very special. What we wanted to share is something we call the Ferritic Unique Process. What you'll see on this page is this is our entire roadmap that we've built over the last 21 years. We implement this process for all of our inbound marketing clients, and we believe that if you implement some of these strategies into your own marketing, you're going to have tremendous results. We've developed this page to be not only in video format, but also text and chapter format as well. When done effectively, this process is going to help your organization build marketing systems that generate leads, nurture leads into clients, and then convert those clients into raving fans of your product, service, mission, and vision. If you have any questions or concerns about anything that you've read, or you would like to kind of walk through this with one of our specialists, please reach out to us. You can do that at info@faratech.com. So once again, the domain to find out our unique process is faratechuniqueprocess.com.